that his office was just the tip of the iceberg. The triple stacking of books only continued to spill over into his amazing writing space. Now, Mike as a writer is probably the only thing more intimidating than Mike as a reader. And this, we joke in the department, but mostly we joke to make ourselves feel better about ourselves. We like to say, oh, they just drop off of him. I think I've made at least one reference that it reminds me of the mother in the Monty Python movie, The Meaning of Life, where, you don't even notice anymore. The books just keep piling up. Except it's more than that. It's 12,310 citations, which is impressive, but I think is actually the most strong testament, or the strongest testament to the fact that this really is a continuation party and not a retirement party. Because Mike's citations peaked in 2016 and haven't dropped since, which is to say that past 5 years of his career have exceeded the other 50 years of his career in terms of output, citation, and relevance. I can't think of a scholar other than the person who regularly checks in with me to make sure that they're keeping up with one another, Bill Conley, that has in their careers made sure that their acceleration reached terminal velocity at the end, not the beginning or the middle. It just keeps coming. In those citations, I don't even really know where to begin, other than the fact that even our university, who I think, short of having a gun held to their head, would never want to admit how amazing Mike is, has awarded him both the Regents Medal of Excellence in Research, as well as our College Excellence in Research Award, not to mention also the Excellence in Teaching Award. These things have been part of the reason why when the APSR did their most scientific study of our field in terms of citations, supposedly, that Mike was one of the top 20 most cited political theorists anywhere. I should add at this moment that one of the other top 20 and the only other university to have two top 20 scholars was us, because Kathy was the other one. But it didn't matter, right? This list was political theorists from Oxford, from Harvard, from all over the world, and Mike was at the top. And there are reasons for that. And I'm going to go through the books because every one of these books was a career. The first book I came across was Violent Cartographies, Mapping Cultures in War, which came out in 1997. I was introduced to it because I hated the political science department at University of Texas at Austin, where I was an undergrad. The best person that was encouraged that I should go talk to about international relations was a guy named Walt Whitman Rostow, who is still teaching at UT Austin in his, I think, late 70s at that point in time. He was also one of the architects of the Vietnam War. I didn't want to talk to him. He was a war criminal. So I went to Half Price Books looking for something to read about international relations. And some UT professor who had no interest in critical IR had dumped all their review copies of the Borderline series. And in that was Violent Cartographies for a whopping $6. I skipped lunch that day. And I bought that, Writing Security and the Ethos of Pluralization. And there endeth my possibility of ever working for the State Department. That book introduced me to Levinas. It introduced me to Derrida. It made me think that the things that I loved about philosophy, the reason why I was already interested in people like Michel Foucault and Martin Heidegger, that I could ask those questions in the context of war. No one had given me that permission before. Mike gave me that permission. Now, in no order, but we just need to hear every one of them. Language and Political Understanding, 1981. This is what kicks off Mike's career as far as I'm concerned. It's the Mike that I know, not the Mike that modeled things. And since then has averaged a book every other year. Except the average isn't accurate because it's like an asymptotic curve. He went from averaging a book about every other year to a book and a half a year in the last 5 years. Studies in Transdisciplinary Method, For Moral Ambiguity, National Culture and the Politics of the Family, which introduced me to Agamben, and I think also started the interest in Agamben for many scholars in IR, because it was before September 11th. Cinematic Geopolitics, which introduced me to Rancière. Deforming American Political Thought, which was my favorite of his books when I was a graduate student, because it truly showed how much radical thinking could happen within a text, not just against a text. Methods in Nations, Punctuations, How Art Thinks the Political, reading Adam Smith, Desire, History and Value, The Political Sublime, The Politics of Representation, The Cinematic Political, Film Composition as Political Theory, War Crimes, Atrocity and Justice, Reading the Postmodern Polity, cinematic political thought narrating race, nation, and gender, politics and time, genre in the city, writing politics, the phenomenology of religious belief most recently. 19 books. I'm pretty sure there are more, and I know they're in other languages, but those are the books I know, and they fill an entire shelf of my library. And that's not to mention the edited collections, which helped give birth, right? Literally, like international relations as a critical practice, as opposed to the statecraft of whispering in leaders' ears, came from books like International Intertextual Relations, which he did with James Derderian, which, as far as I'm concerned, kicked off all the questions we're still asking today. The Politics of Moralizing, which he edited with Jane Bennett. Moral Spaces, which had some of the best work by scholars like Kate Mazzo, Bonnie Honig, David Campbell, all making political theory and international relations conversations that couldn't end, that had to continue. And Sovereign Lives, Power and Global Politics, which really brought home the interest in Agamben and Schmidt in IR, which he did with Ginny Edkins and PinFat. But I'll raise this. When looking at his top 10 articles, number 9, still Rational Political Man, A Synthesis of Economic and Social Psychological Perspectives, APSR, 1969. And I wondered, is it just that he got so many public citations in the 1970s that this one is still cruising along? No. It is still being cited amongst the people who are still trying to crunch the numbers that Mike crunched and decided he was done. People are still trying to catch up and talking about it in 2020 and 2021. The last, I want to say a few things about Mike as a mentor and friend. Coming to the department, not just right out of graduate school, but with only one dissertation chapter under my belt when I interviewed, and having just filed my dissertation, I think 2 days before the deadline to keep my job when I started in August. Mike read my writing. He encouraged me when I was overwhelmed by work. He encouraged me when I was overwhelmed by conspiratorial adversaries. He encouraged me when I was overwhelmed by parenting. He had the heart to tell me that really he didn't write that many books until his kids were out of the house, even though, of course, that wasn't really true. He and Hannah always welcomed us into their home. From the first day I arrived on campus, Mike went to great lengths to make me feel equal parts welcome and inspired, to make sure that the drudgery didn't mean that I lost the way to writing things. Mike was the first COVID coffee I had, the first time I ventured out of the house with the risk of getting sick. Our department will bear the mark of Michael Shapiro for as long a time as Mike wants to come to the department. His new freedom, I hopefully doesn't mean anything more than missing faculty meetings, but even if it does, his presence will be constant. There's not a school named after him. We don't talk about the Shapiro School in IR because his intellectual trajectory has never stayed in one place long enough for the concrete to dry. He is a force of nature, always on the move. I gave up almost immediately trying to catch up with Mike, but I hope I always chase the same generous stream of curiosity and thought he continues to guzzle, just binge drink every day when he creates book after book. He's had a life of new ideas always, new writing always, new artistic events always, new friendships always. This is the life of Michael Shapiro I chase. Thank you, Mike.
Thank you.
Mahalo, Jairus. That was fabulous. So I'm going to just share a few more things before our next speaker. Going back to the kudos board, you see here this early picture. Thank you, Kathy, for contributing that photo. And I thought I would also share this video here so you can see that, as Jairus said, Mike's continued to be so productive and prolific. And yet, even from our current students, real gratefulness for your generosity of mentorship. So I'll play this video from
Mike. I just want to thank you.
Can you all hear this? Yeah? Okay.
Not only sharing knowledge with us, but for thinking with us, for questioning with us, and for composing with us, and for letting us into your own process of composition and the creation of knowledge in this unique and meaningful way. I am incredibly grateful to have had and to continue having the opportunity to work and learn from and with you, and am wishing you all the best in this next act, and yeah, thank you.
All right, mahalo. And if you go back to checking out the kudos board, you'll see lots of similar kinds of sentiments from so many of your students, Mike, who have just really appreciated the ways that you have treated them as sort of colleagues in development, you know. Okay, and with that, I'm gonna go ahead and
say that I've
oh yeah, please go
I've
ahead.
at least as much from them as they have learned from me. It's been really, I've been a lucky person here.
Thanks so much, Mike. I'm gonna invite Sam Opondo to say a few words.
Okay. All right. Thank you, Milani. I have many words, but I'll try and keep it short. Always joke with Mike that when invited to speak, I could sometimes end up treating people to African times. You know, Mike told me that to always pluralize, to think in terms of times. And it will be in two parts, just a little memory, because Kathy asked me to speak over memory from graduate school. And then I'll read a little bit, just a short reflection about what this means for me. I took Mike's Writing Politics seminar 15 years ago. And when Kathy invited me to say a few words about a memorable encounter with Mike from graduate school, I remember responding to her by letting her know that it would be impossible to put it in prose and in a few words. I continue to work with Mike. We exchange emails pretty much 3 or 4 times a day for the past 15 years. So he not only the most cited person in my work, his emails are the emails that populate my inbox more than anyone else's. Yeah, when he watches Ethos, what he's watching now, he'll send a little bit from Netflix. This is what I'm watching. When he sees an article, he doesn't just share that citation, but invites you to think about what is happening constantly. So this has been a mode of writing and thinking and being with Mike. For me, the writing seminar with Mike has been an extended conversation, began in class, but has also been a conversation with family members. Mike is a very, very good friend to my daughter, Howie, and they became friends when she was 2 years old, that we kept on apologizing when she broke a vase in Mike's house. And he tells us it's not a big deal, and kept on asking us, come on, just go easy on the kid. And those acts of generosity became, just the invitations. The first act of writing for me was when Mike's Genre and the City seminar. And it wasn't only for me, but it was for multiple students. And it's just an illustration of how generous a teacher Mike is. Without saying he was mentoring us to be writers, he asked us to present our work in class, got a couple of the essays, edited them, and got them published as a special issue of the Journal of Cultural Politics, and then thereafter a book. And these ongoing conversations have had many intended and unintended lessons, a lot of laughter, and continuous provocation to thought. For instance, and here I'll use the same quote that Jairus used just to tell you how much that has been an invitation for all of us. Mike's oft cited nutritional yet scatological advice on writing, where he says, if you want to shit like an elephant, you can't afford to eat like a bird, was for me a lesson not only on writing, but on genre. Being more attuned to fabulous worlds of animals than the practice of writing, or even film fables at that time, I read too much into what was meant to encourage us to read widely and write intensely. For instance, I knew that there is a big generic difference between African elephants and Asian elephants, that elephants walk in herds, and these are female-led herds. They do not eat or shit in solitude. That seabird guano has made and unmade our modern world and our colonial worlds, that the antiseptic vulture droppings cool this bird and cleanse the wild, and that it is not the same as hummingbird droppings. Whenever I'd be able to point out such nuances to Mike, he'd tell me, very good thinking, now sit down and write. Yeah, so it's not just about reading, you have to show up, you have to be able to write. In short, Mike's everyday stories, his jokes, his writing, his multi-layered illustrations inspired us to question genre and its place in how we sense and make sense of things. Here are some words about being with Mike and a few more words that are for Mike. And I know when I say this with a singular I, I'm speaking for many people who are Mike's students in Rio, at Greg Nog, in Norway, in so many parts of the world. So not only in UH, but this has been the experience. Learning with Mike, I embraced the potency of words, posed questions to questioners, weaved texts and sublimed contexts as we fabricated and composed other worlds, through writing as critical thinking and cinema and as political thought. Conversations about writing styles became a style of life. Friendship with concept became mutual friendships and then familial entanglements, laced with laughter and witty banter, but also fears and a tincture of tears. Writing with Mike, I found my own signature, embraced philopoetic literature, blended words and worlds of pictures, bended genres and created an unlikely montage, and challenged the image of the sage. With Mike, I have played with pages of scripture, I have penned and opened a world of becomings, and also found other rhythms and raptures. I walked into Mike's class as his student, was embraced with citations and excitations, was afflicted by things I might not have engaged, and walked out a friend, then became a fellow traveler, a teacher, and a collaborator. With the perpetual reader of my paracitations, the final words of my book are a note of gratitude to Mike, and the first words of the book are dedicated to him. For Mike Shapiro, extraordinary teacher, extender of generosities, dedicated friend, aesthetic composer, assembler of thought worlds, and attentive thinker of the event. Thank you, Mike.
Thank you, Sam.
Thank you so much, Sam. That was beautiful. Okay, I'm going to share one more video from the board, and then I will open it up for anyone who's joined us here today who might want to say anything, and then, of course, give you a few minutes, Mike. All right. To hear from Melissa.
Mike Shapiro retiring? I can't fathom it. All I can visualize is Mike continuing in perpetuity with the daily schedule he modeled for all of his students. At his desk by 8 or 9 a.m., write all morning, then in the afternoon, teach, meet with students, exercise, maybe take a painting class, publish a book a year. Of the many things you have taught me, Mike, that discipline has served me best as I've moved to and through a career as a politics scholar into the world of literary writing. You have always seen those of us whose work troubles the borders between the political and art, the political and the cultural. You've always recognized us as doing important work, and for that, I've always been grateful. Thank you for also being a good friend. We might have had to weather a few jokes we'd rather not have heard. But as grad students, we loved every moment we had with you at Anna Banana's or at your house making pizza and listening to Bebop. And I will never forget the way you subsidized a whole canoe's worth of us grad students so many of us could attend our first ISA in Chicago. I think there were 7 of us all crammed into that one hotel room. Bianca Isaki, Io Kepa, Ikaika Hussey, Noah Viernez, Rohan Kalyan, Brian Gallagher, and Jaden Adams. Your generosity in my moments of panic and doubt was always such a gift, and I treasure it still. So to the Jewish uncle I never knew I wanted, to the theorist and co-conspirator who gave me Bembe and Rancière and Ziarek, maraming salamat, and felicidades. It gives me great pleasure to imagine that you might be even more productive in retirement. Sending you all my aloha and pagmamahal.
Oh,
Thank
so
you so
nice.
much, Melissa.
So at this time, if anyone who is joining in the audience would like to say something, raise a hand, or just go ahead and pop in. Otherwise, I'll go ahead and give the mic over to Mike.
I just wanted to say that seeing Kenan up there, there's someone who competes in terms of the voluminous reading more than anybody I've ever known.
I remember very vividly when Mike saw the movie Black Robe. He went to the library and checked out 12 volumes of French
The Jesuit relation.
right, the Jesuit diaries of Canada in the time of contact, and he just started reading through them. And I thought, that's somebody who really likes to read.
That reminds me of a great story that the late Werner Levy told about one of his sons. He gave him a book for Christmas. And the kid opened the package. He took a look and he said, "I already have a book."
Aloha, Mike. I can't believe you're retiring. I wrote this on the Kudo board, but in case there's other people who don't realize this and haven't read the Kudo board, I want to say this again. I want to thank you and make sure that everybody knows that you are the originator of Indigenous politics and that you had this foresight in the 1990s that Indigenous politics needed to be a thing in our department. And you went about it in the right way. You convened a lot of people, community people, all the various thinkers, Hawaiian thinkers and other people on campus. And then you set about and you made it happen. First, just the MA specialization as a formal thing. And then after I was talked into participating in Indigenous politics, which when I was hired, I didn't actually agree to at the first, but then I got kind of talked into it. And then we hired Jody. And then Jody and you and I were the ones who wrote all the courses for the graduate courses for Indigenous politics. And then you just let us have it. And so I'm very, very grateful to you for doing that. And I think everyone should remember that it was you who started it brilliantly.
Thanks very much.
Hi, Mike, and also hi, Sam. It's good to see you. I just wanted to read out, I don't know if it got translated onto Kudos, but it was written for Mike's card. And so I'll read that out. So this is addressed to you, Mike. I feel extremely fortunate to know Mike as a friend and as a mentor. I know the way I think and write has been largely inspired by Mike's insatiable curiosity and tremendous will to reflect on the world and its complexity and immanence. With his witty humor and humility, Mike has a special ability to listen deeply and respond to each student's life worlds, and as a result, challenges us to find who we are as a thinker, writer, and a person. As long as I'm teaching, I will always be carrying an image of Mike in my classrooms, one of wisdom, compassion, and creativity. So I'm kind of overwhelmed with emotion, so I'll just end there.
Who's that? Thanks so much, Sophie.
Would anyone else like to say anything? Kathy?
I would. Of course, I want to thank Mike for all the work, all the contributions, the intellectual richness. Very on a personal note, I came here for only 1 year in '85. It was intended that I would go back to what I thought of as my real job. And it had never occurred to me, since I only knew mainland political science departments, that you could have a political science department where theory was welcome, that it was possible to be in political science and be a theorist and not feel like the poor relative that's always, got the tin cup out. And this is such a great place to do political theory. And it's Mike, and it was Montford, and Henry Carriel played an important role. There were many people, but Mike, you were the center of that for me, and I really appreciate it.
Thanks, Kathy.
Thank you, Kathy. Dick.
Yeah, you couldn't find two people more different in their approach to studying politics than Mike and me. And yet it was Mike that got me out here in the first place. I was dissatisfied with, you're going to find this hard to believe, with Yale and with System Development Corporation. I didn't know whether I was going to go into a corporate world or the academic world at the time. And I had just called Mike up and asked him, hey, I'm mixing it up, Mike, with two different things. Sorry. In any case, the point is that it was his invitation to me twice to return to the political science department and make a home for a quantitative analytic type like me. And I think many students benefited from that, from the difference. And we've had many students in common that, back and forth. So I wanted to say that. And he also helped me through a very sad situation. I don't need to mention the faculty member that I think, Mike, you know what I'm talking about. A very sad situation in which one of our faculty had to retire early. Very humbling type of situation, I must say. So, Mike, I can't say I'm going to miss you because I'll be missing too. There you go. That's enough for now.
Thank you, Dick. I'm just going back to gallery to see if anybody else wanted to say anything. Otherwise, if you can all grab something that you'd like to toast with.
Yeah, okay. Yep.
And thank you so much to Kathy for taking beverages and Lay over to Mike's house and dropping off. So we'd like to toast to 55 wonderful years and hopefully another 55 more in a new relationship between Mike Shapiro and the political science department. Thank you so much, Mike. Congratulations.
Thanks for this. Yeah, it reminds me that maybe I'll surpass the Heinz Company's 57, right?
Cheers.
Cheers.
Thanks
And-
everyone for attending. Very nice of you to come.
Yeah, Mike, did you want to say anything, a few words, offer a few words before we close?
Yeah, just briefly, I was been asked to do an interview for an oral history. And a variety of interesting questions were raised, one of which was, how has my philosophy of teaching changed? And I said, well, it's a little bit grand to call it a philosophy. My initial philosophy of teaching was, how can I get through an hour without humiliating myself? That was the philosophy. It took me some time to have the ability to have a philosophy, to get comfortable enough to sort of think in class. And now, as far as what I'm concerned, teaching is learning. Always it's about learning. And I advise students when they start teaching to think of their class as primarily for them, to prepare to learn something each time. If the students learn something, that's great. But the main thing is that you've got to learn something. Prepare yourself to learn something new every time you go into the classroom. Gregory Bateson has a nice expression for learning to learn. He calls it deutero learning, which is learning to learn. And it took me quite a while to learn, but that's been the most valuable resource that I can imagine.
That's wonderful advice for us. Thank you so much, Mike, for those words. I want to just remind everyone that if you haven't yet added to the kudos board and you still want to do so, the link is in the chat. Also, just to follow up on what Mike said, the Center for Oral History really graciously offered to interview both Mike and Dick, our faculty members who are retiring this year. So fortunately, we were able to, Katarina was able to interview Manfred last semester, and now we'll have also permanently archived these interviews with Mike and Dick. So really grateful that you're willing to do that, Mike. It'll be a valuable resource for the long run for us.
Well, like everything else, you don't know what you're thinking until you have to talk about it.
So thank you all so much for joining us for the celebration of Mike. We'll be doing a similar celebration of Dick for his retirement next week, just following the department meeting, which I promise I will keep short so we can just get right to celebrating. So thank you all for being here on this Friday, and hope to see you next week.
Bye, everybody.
Congratulations again, Mike. Aloha.
Thanks so much. No, I really
Nice
appreciate
to see so many familiar faces.
Bye, Kenan.